Mega farm relief package in the works. Sources tell ET Now the Prime Minister's office is weighing options to dole out as much as 10,000 rupees per farm household or look at 4,000 rupees per acre, just like Telangana. A cabinet meet is expected to weigh the options in a week. Bofors brought Congress down. Rafale will bring Modi back to power, claims Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman as she continues to fight it out on the floor of the House over the Rafale deal. Congress President Rahul Gandhi seeks a probe against Prime Minister for alleged corruption and weakening national security by picking his friend as an offset partner. In a 60-second hearing, the Supreme Court refers the Ayodhya case to the appropriate bench to be heard on the 10th of January, even as Rahul Gandhi says Ram Mandir should be an agenda for elections. Smriti Irani takes a jibe with the Congress president, asking why Hindutva was only for state boards. Equities snapped their two-day losing streak, led by banks and auto stocks amid positive sentiment from global equity markets. Losses in IT heavyweights like Infosys, TCS and HCL Tick, though, have limited the gains. No early breather for Jet Airways that's struggling to stay afloat. ET Now learns that lenders to the carrier are unlikely to extend any fresh line of credit until the forensic audit ordered by the State Bank of India gives the green light. The government denies reports that the RBI had stopped production of 2,000 rupee currency notes, clearing the air. The Finance Ministry says printing was going on according to planned and more than adequate notes are in the system. And India on the cusp of a historic Test series win in Australia. Pujara and Pant built an unassailable 622 runs in the first innings, putting the Aussies on the back foot. With 3 days to go, the balance clearly tilted in India's favour. Good evening. You've joined us right here on the Indian Development Debate. I'm Taneia Bhardwaj and we're coming to you live from our Mumbai studios. Now, farm is where Modi's heart is. With general elections around the corner, the Prime Minister and his A-team are warming up to the idea of big bang bailout for farmers. And ET Now is picking up from top-level sources. The government is weighing the option of offering a cash incentive of up to 10,000 rupees to every farm household in the country. Back-of-the-envelope calculations show that this could actually cost the exchequer in excess of 2 lakh crore rupees if one is to assume that there are, of course, nearly 25 crore eligible farm families in India. Although the move will put further strain on the fiscal position, the experiment may be worth the risk given the angst amongst the farming community. Clearly, the Modi government is learning its lessons from the debacle in the recent assembly elections in the Hindi heartland, the big bang farm bailout package and its impact really on the economy and politics, and just how far will it go in alleviating the farm stress is what we're discussing on the India Development Debate tonight. And for that, let me introduce our panel for the evening. We've got Siraj Hussain, former Agriculture Secretary, Pranab Sen, former member of the Planning Commission, joins in. So does Food and Agriculture Policy expert Devendra Sharma. And we've got Sadanand Dhume, a resident fellow of the American Enterprise Institute. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you so much for taking the time out. Mr. Hussain, let me begin by you. As I said, reports are suggesting that the government is toying with the idea of a one household, one incentive like option. Now, from what we're picking up, this is absolutely source-based information. What is up for discussion is a 4,000 rupee per acre Telangana-like model. And on the other hand, there's the Odisha model that provides income support of something like 10,000 rupees to each farm household. Help us understand, the difference really between the two, and more importantly, can either really be adopted given we're so close to the general election?
First of all, let me clarify that there is no difference at all between what is being called Telangana model and the Odisha model.
Okay.
Both are direct investment support to farmers. There are differences in detail because in Odisha, the state government is providing support to not only the farmers but also tenant farmers and the landless laborers, etc. So there is no difference. Now, we have been writing, we have been saying, Dr. Gulati, me and several others, that compared to several other options, for example, the price deficiency payment, procurement of all the commodities at minimum support price, or even loan waivers, this is a better option because it is less distorting, easier to administer, and the benefit reaches the farmers directly. However, as far as I can see, it may not be possible for the government to actually roll out a scheme like this because it requires a lot of preparation at the ground level for correction of land records. What can happen is that the government can take a formal decision and then include it in the manifesto to be implemented by the government if it comes back to power.
Dr. Pranab said any direct investment support to farmers has a large financial implication for the government. A DBT of say 4,000 rupees, for instance, will cost it something like 2 lakh crore rupees. With the election looming, the government of course wants to make, a direct impact. Do you see it deviating therefore from its fiscal deficit target?
Well, I mean, the point that was made is an announcement and an actual payout are two different things. Even if they make an announcement tomorrow, it's very unlikely the payout will start till well in the future. So in terms of the fisc, I don't think it makes a difference one way or the other. The real question is a completely different one, which is that while this is going to be hugely popular, its consequences on the economy can be devastatingly bad if it is badly designed.
Sure, and we will talk about those, devastating consequences. Devendra Sharma, the Prime Minister has ruled out a farm loan waiver. In an interview to ANI about, 3 days ago, he said they are mere lollipops. Is a direct investment support, you think, the next best option?
Well, I think both are required. It is easy to say that's a lollipop, but if you look at it, the 2.3 lakh crore worth of a loan waiver in several states that has been announced so far is going to benefit about 35 million people. So that's not a lollipop. I think 35 million is a big number, and in this country we need to really come up with that kind of a support to farmers. Now, having said that, that's, of course, we all know it's a short-term measure. It's not going to be long-term very helpful. So the next step, of course, is direct income support, which of course should be seen as a safety net. It is not an income approach, the kind of income approach that we would like to really see farmers being addressed to, or the issue being addressed to in the days to come. So it has to be followed up by various reforms in agriculture. But yes, direct income support is very crucial. And I think let's not forget, we might say that 2 lakh crore is a very big amount. But if you just come to think about it, 4,000 rupees would come to what? 10,000 rupees in a year would mean about 650 or 670 rupees in a month. Now, if 670 rupees in a month is an economic stimulus for farmers, I think that clearly tells us that the economic insecurity or the kind of inequality that prevails in this country is so enormous, and we have ignored it all these years. 650 rupees a month is not an economic stimulus that we should be very proud of giving to farmers. And especially when you talk of fiscal, I don't understand. For the last 10 years, we have been giving 1,86,000 crore every year to the industry as an economic stimulus, and no economist ever questioned that. So there is money there. It's only going to the wrong places. I'm sure that it will be now the right kind of use for that money.
Sadanand Dume, how feasible is the adoption of a direct benefit transfer model going to be? Sure, it's going to, plug leaks, but then there's also the fear of exclusion. How do you think a country like India can address that? Maybe the jam trinity of Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile could do the work of correct identification?
That's a great question. Taneia, just to put up front that I'm not an expert on agricultural economists, unlike the distinguished people we have on this panel. I did recently read Mr. Hussein's fine paper that he co-written with Dr. Gulati and others with ICRIA. And so it seems to me from reading that this certainly is something feasible and also preferable to the main other option that seems to be on the table in political terms, which is loan waivers. Now, I don't have enough technical expertise to tell you how quickly the government would be able to do it or not. But what I'm struck by in this sort of entire debate is that, I think we seem to have missed a larger issue, which is that, in a sense, all of these policy options that are being considered, whether it's, the 10,000 rupees or it's 4,000 rupees per acre, or the alternative which is being put forward by the Congress, which is loan waivers, I mean, all of these are, in a sense, an acceptance of failure. The fact is that India has about 50% of its population that is contributing only about 15% of GDP. efforts to move people from farms onto factories, to make them more productive, to raise their standards of living in a more sustainable way, have essentially not gone where we wanted them to go. And so now we're in a position where politicians are basically coming up with different forms of populism, and we're being asked to sort of pick and say, well, which one is less, which one distorts less, which one is less bad, which one is less damaging to the fiscal, and so on. But I think that we have to place this in the context that this is in the context of a larger failure and not really a success.
Siraj Hussain, let me ask you, what we are also picking up is that what's also being mulled are interest-free crop loans at a rate of 50,000 rupees per hectare up to about 1 lakh rupees. Again, help us understand just how far that's going to go, again, to sort of, ease the pain, because the counter argument to that is that you're also running the risk then of entering this vicious cycle of, agri NPAs and subsequent loan waivers.
See, presently the farmers have to pay 4% rate of interest on crop loans up to 3 lakhs. These loans are drawn on Kisan credit card, which means they are like working capital loans. Farmers can draw any amount, up to 3 lakhs. Now, in some states, Madhya Pradesh, for example, that 4% farmers' share was also being paid by the state government, which means farmers were availing crop loans at 0 rate of interest. Now, the total subsidy paid by the central government is about 15,000 crores interest subsidy. We call it interest subvention, which was earlier in the budget of Ministry of Finance, but is now with Ministry of Agriculture. So, if the government wants to waive it entirely and not charge anything from farmers, I think it will mean an outgo of another 15,000 crores. But I do not support this kind of intervention, because then it will be another incentive to unscrupulous people to avail that loan and invest in fixed deposits. In fact, we had set up a committee. Unfortunately, it has not been acted upon. We wanted to find a way of directly, transferring this subsidy to farmers' accounts rather than going through banks. So it will be very distorting. I am not in favor of this idea.
And do weigh in on that. I think you wanted to come in. Mr. Hussain thinks it's going to be distorting. What are your views? Dr. Pranam Sen, that's for you.
Did you ask me?
Yes.
Yeah. I agree. The point is, I think there is a completely misplaced impression that, the farmers are unable to pay interest. This is not true. People keep forgetting that the farm incomes are rolled over minimum of twice every year. Now, when that happens, the actual loan burden isn't that high. We make a very, very serious mistake in confusing farm loans with term loans which are made to industry, which can last for 7, 8, 20 years. So, I completely agree with him. I think it's a bad idea. But the fact of the matter is that the farmers do need some form of a safety net. Now, a safety net is somewhat different from things like interest subvention. I don't even understand what that does. The advantage of a safety net is it enables farmers to take risks, which is the route to actually getting higher incomes. And that is the important dimension that we have to keep in account, which is that every farmer is an entrepreneur. We tend to assume that they are not, but they are. They are in fact possibly the most complex entrepreneurs in the country. So we really need to think about it somewhat differently. I think an income support is not a bad idea, provided it is well designed. And my fear it will not be.
Okay. Devendra Sharma, how will this new package of DBT and crop insurance impact the selling of the produce? Will it tackle the sordid tale that our farmers on the ground go through, which is of not getting prices for their produce?
Well, you are very right. You know, the kind of exercise that is being done now, which many think is political, is actually aimed at getting the farmers out of the distress, immediately getting out of the distressed situation. But more importantly would be how in the days to come, or in the months to come, or in the years to come, how does the farmer, or is he able to get the kind of economic price that he should be getting for his produce? Now that is where the economic reforms, agriculture reforms are required to take place. But I doubt if the governments would be stepping out or taking the next step to provide for agriculture reforms in this country. You know, their target is 2019 elections, and once the elections are over, we will perhaps see that agriculture again goes to the back burner. Now that is a worry. So therefore, I feel that one electoral debacle has brought the political parties or agriculture into the center stage for political parties, and I hope the second electoral debacle in 2019 makes them really work hard to see that agriculture is back on the track. It is in the center stage of the agriculture of the Indian economy. I think that's a big challenge, and I don't see at the moment anything happening in that particular direction.
You know, do come in on that. Is it just that, this farm relief package, an election gimmick perhaps? Because I think we've all agreed that the government can make some meaningful promises, but it's not like it's going to be able to really meet them.
I mean, I may not go as far as to call it a gimmick, but I certainly agree with Mr. Sharma. I mean, this is definitely, this is a band-aid on a gaping wound.
Yeah.
There's nothing particularly long-term about this, and the timing is certainly being dictated by the approaching election and by the recent losses in 3 Hindi heartland states. So I think that the government finds itself on the back foot. It finds itself pressured by the fact that the main opposition party is demanding loan waivers. It wants to sort of offer something else, and it seems like this would be a popular move. Now, on the larger question of agricultural reform and the political economy of agricultural reform, I mean, we have now gone through, 3 successive governments that have, in theory looked at these things, but in practice we've seen, we haven't really seen the ball move very much. So I guess the question, that I would have for, the distinguished technocrats on this panel is that, why is it that the technocrats keep coming up with sane and sensible suggestions, and we don't have politicians anywhere who seem to be able to go beyond these band-aid steps?
Mr. Hussain, actually, why don't you, tackle that question, and let me add my own there, that with roughly 100 days to go for the election, what are some of the immediate steps that you think the government can take to again alleviate the farm stress?
You see, I will try to answer Dr. Dhume's question first. See, the reforms in the agriculture and food space affect millions of people in the country, and many of them, large numbers, are very poor people. In fact, this government, as soon as it was formed, had set up a committee under Dr. Shanta Kumar, the previous Chief Minister of Himachal Pradesh, to suggest a roadmap for reforms in the sector. They had come up with various things. One of the suggestions was that food subsidy is taking a huge chunk. This year it is going to take about 1.69 lakh crores. So instead of covering, about 67% of India's population and giving them wheat at 2 rupees and rice at 3 rupees, reduce that number to something like 40% of Indian population, give them very highly subsidized food, but the money you will thus save can be invested in creating, improving, modernizing the agriculture infrastructure. Now, unfortunately, that did not happen. No reforms of fertilizer subsidy could be undertaken. The government did come up with Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana for completing 99 irrigation projects, but then these projects are implemented by the state governments. They could not be pushed sufficiently hard. So unlike industry, where you tackle the certain things and then you can claim that there is, it is much easier to do business, your ranking goes up, World Bank ranking, etc., just by addressing the problem in 2 cities, that doesn't happen in agriculture. You need a broader political consensus, for which a lot of effort is required, as we saw in case of GST. Now, as far as your question about what is possible in the short term, Harish Damodaran of Indian Express said it yesterday. 2 things he suggested. I fully agree. I have also written about that. First, remove all restrictions on cash transactions in mandis. The buyers are missing. People don't want to stock. Remove the restrictions on cash, and secondly, remove the restrictions on trading of animals.
Right. Okay. I've got just last couple of minutes left on this program. So, Dr. Pranab Sen, I'm going to ask you the same question. With just 100 days left, what is it that the government can do for maximum impact?
What the government can do, the fact is a direct benefit transfer to farmers, I think, is a good idea. But a one-time DBT simply serves no purpose whatsoever except a political one. If they would really like to do something meaningful, they should announce a DBT which would be an ongoing program for the next foreseeable future. Even if they don't pay out a penny this year, just that intent, just bringing the discussion onto the political table will make a huge difference. Mind you, it can't be implemented overnight. There's a huge amount of groundwork that has to be done in identifying who the beneficiaries are going to be, and please don't underestimate that, because this has nothing to do with land records. It has to do with who the tiller is. And we have the West Bengal experience of Operation Barga and the kind of effort it took to actually take down and list down who the actual farmer is. This is not trivial. It will take minimum of a year to 2 years. But I think the announcement, the fact that you think that this is a good idea, and I think it's a good idea, I think will go a long way to actually changing the nature of the discourse that we have at the moment.
Okay. Devendra Sharma, yesterday you had the Prime Minister in Gurdaspur reiterating his promise to double farm income by 2022. It's a promise that's made over and over again. But, more and more, it's seeming like a pipe dream, isn't it?
Well, it is quite obvious that the way the government is trying to bring in the direct benefit transfer, they admit that the promise of doubling the farmers' income is perhaps they realize is not so realistic. Now, having said that, I think the next step that we need to do after direct benefit transfer is taken care of, I think the time has come when we need to have a rethinking on agriculture, which basically includes providing farmers with a guaranteed income. All over the world, I find farmers are protected by an assured income, especially in the developed countries that I talk about. Now, this time has come that we in India also assure income for the farmers. Now, this can be possible if we change the name of the Commission for Agriculture Costs and Prices. It should be renamed as Commission for Farmers' Income and Welfare, and should have a mandate of ensuring farmers roughly 18,000 rupees a month as a household income for the farming community of this country. Now, this is not difficult. Let's not worry about the fiscal deficit. We need to also change the FRBM Act. The Fiscal Responsibility and Business Management Act also is responsible for the kind of dichotomy that we see in the entire economic structure. We have deliberately pushed agriculture to a kind of a situation where it is squeezed out, or whether it is being made to be a sacrificial goat for economic reforms. I think the time has come when we bring agriculture back onto the economic agenda.
Sadanand, last question to you. Farmers are a big vote bank, but with probably the least lobbying power, and so they're hostage to elections and subs, but no real, structural push. Do you expect a change with the recent agitations that you sort of alluded to in your first answer as well, or do you think that things are going to be, back to the same? More importantly, can this sort of bring the trophy home for the BJP in 2019?
Well, I mean, it's really too early to say what's going to happen in 2019. I think a lot of that is going to hinge upon, how seriously voters are going to take a promise versus actual cash in accounts. But I'd like to sort of, reiterate again that, we've been having this discussion in terms of what we need to do for the farmers. And of course, that is something very important. But I think the fundamental problem that India faces, which is not being addressed, is that India has far too many farmers. You can't have a country where you have basically half your population that is spending their lives in a fundamentally unproductive profession. So the real challenge is you improve the lot of the people who are there, because that is urgent, of course, but you have to find a way to get people off the farms and into factories. And I would say that those two things are connected. And that second half is really where politicians from successive governments have failed.
All right, gentlemen, with that, I'm afraid we're out of time. Siraj Hussain, Pranab Sen, Devendra Sharma and Sadanand Dume, thank you so much for taking the time out. We'll take a quick break and then come right back with the second installment of the India Development.